three. Scott's laughing at me. Three, two, one. Lucretia Ryan is a financial writer, educator, philanthropist, and the founder of financialfreedomforwomen.org, a nonprofit dedicated to the education and empowerment of women to make financial decisions that are in their best interest. After a career at IBM, she is now helping women gain financial independence. Welcome, Lucretia.
Well, thanks, Dan. I'm thrilled to be here, thrilled to meet both of you. I've been a big fan of your podcast. I listen to it every week. Listen to Learn by Being Burned. Love that. Love your website. I have links to it on my website. I think it's a great resource. And I just want to start off by saying, how much I admire what the two of you are doing, and your perseverance for years doing this is just, outstanding.
Well, those are wonderful words. I like to joke that we must be really bad at our job because we've been doing this for over 20 years and the K-12 403B is still a problem. Well, Lucretia, we are big fans of you, so we have been looking forward to digging into what you do. First question, though, geographically, where are we speaking to you from?
Yeah, so I'm in Westchester, New York. Right now we're having a heat wave. So I left Florida to get away from the heat, but now we're having a really bad heat wave. I was at the pool yesterday, and it was wall to wall little kids because it's hot here.
Generally, how are your summers in that area?
Well, they've been getting warmer.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is I don't have to pay much for snow shoveling anymore. So, but yeah, they're definitely getting warmer.
Yeah,
So,
that's a little disappointing to hear. I always say that my place of birth, Buffalo, is going to be the place to be in about 25 years. I jokingly call it Winterfell, but if things keep going the way they are, you've got the Great Lakes, you've got pretty good infrastructure. The only thing I think Buffalo doesn't have, and maybe you have to go a little more south, is to find good mountain bike trails because I think Buffalo is relatively flat, if I recall correctly. Okay, let's talk about a New York-based company. I believe they're based in New York that you work for. It's an iconic American company. Real briefly, can you talk about your career at IBM?
yeah, so I was very rare these days. I was at IBM for my whole career out of when I went to Cornell undergraduate, and I programmed for them for 2 summers, and then I was worked for IBM. Every 2 years I had a different job. I was on the sales side of it. Then also in their business part, in the end, more in the business partner organization, working with outside companies in the cloud space, cybersecurity space. So just IBM has sort of their feet in like all different areas. So I'd say every 2 years I had a different job, and then like midway in my career, I was like, oh, I really love this financial planning. So I read every single book that I could, every article that I could. I was like, oh, okay, I'd like to be a financial planner and sort of switch careers, because I was a computer science major, always, in the tech industry, but this was my passion. So I interviewed with Smith Barney, and I was like, oh my God, this is just selling awful financial products. There was no fee only financial planners at that time that I was aware of. So, so I was like, okay, well, I won't be switching careers here. Stayed at IBM, for my entire career, which, as I said, is very rare these days. But I always, my passion was always, financial planning and investing, and I was a big saver. Live frugally, but big saver.
Well, I just find this your work story so interesting because I think this era has passed us. The working at one company your entire career. My dad was somebody who did that. Graduated from Penn State in the early '60s. Worked for a company called Cutler Hammer, which subsequently got bought out by bigger companies. But he stayed within that organization his whole career. Wow. What I love about your story is you were doing different things. That probably kept it interesting, but I also love how at some point you realized retirement is something you can do, but what do you want to do afterwards? And I love that you sort of had this goal and then aimed at it. Quick question about retiring. When did you retire and how did you make that decision?
So I retired about 2 years ago. And so IBM provided a service with Goldman Sachs that they did financial planning. So they had very sophisticated software. They didn't give you investment advice, but they gave you very sophisticated software. So I modeled, when could I afford to retire? So, uh, I was a big fan. So every quarter, I don't think people are as crazy as I was, but every quarter I would model, okay, could I retire at 58? Could I retire at 60? Could I retire at 62? Can I buy a house in Florida? Changing all these different assumptions. So I really had it planned so that I could retire, when I wanted and not have to worry about earning a living, going forward. So it was really and they had very sophisticated software that, would do that, count all the taxes and everything. And so, and then how much I had to be contributing, saving, each month so that I actually could retire. So, that was really, it was when could I afford it, live the lifestyle that I wanted to, and do the things that I wanted to. That's what it came down to.
How did healthcare fit into this? I don't know. Does IBM provide healthcare benefits? You look too young to be Medicare age. So how do you handle healthcare?
Well, that is a key issue for anyone retiring below 65, because it is unaffordable. So I go through Obamacare through the marketplace, and I pay $1,000 a month. That's just the way it is. There's no way around it unless you don't want health care. So anyone who retires before 65, that is when I'm, non-smoking female, that's the price you're going to pay.
Yeah, I would bet a male of similar age, will pay even more. And my understanding, I don't know if you know this, is right now there's a subsidy for people who are kind of that age, pre 65, maybe post 58, which I think goes away in a couple of years, which I think people don't realize. So hopefully that stays. I don't know if you have any details on that.
Well, I've never heard of it going away, but
No,
it,
not completely, but I believe the Biden administration put in place for about 4 years or so some type of supplement to people in this age group because we're sort of that age group that gets hit the hardest on healthcare because we frankly have more healthcare needs.
yeah, I mean, if you retire before 65, my opinion is your only choice, unless your company offers something, is the marketplace,
Yeah.
Obamacare. Um, and depending on what your income is, then you can get a subsidy. So I helped someone who was young, he was 30, he would have paid $500 a year, but because um, he didn't make much income, he only had to pay $150. So it's heavily,
Is that per month? Per
yeah,
month.
per month.
Yeah.
So it's heavily subsidized. So that's why I'm also a big fan of the Roth, because if you take money out of your Roth, it doesn't count as income either for Obamacare subsidy or for Medicare. So, that's also definitely a consideration.
Yeah, interesting strategy. I've always heard with like a Roth IRA, you want to tap that later. And if you don't have a 401k, I'm sure Scott will correct me here in a moment, but if you don't have like a Roth 401k or a Roth 403b, does it make sense to pull money from a Roth IRA for a couple years leading up to age 65 so you get that subsidy? I don't know.
Well, another strategy that I worked with somebody else on is they were close to 60, they were 63, so they had 2 years. And um, I had him take out money to live on for 2 years. So he had cash. So he took it out while he was still working and paid taxes on that. But then for the next 2 years, he really
Oh,
had no
interesting.
income. So
Interesting.
that he could get a subsidy as well. So that is also another strategy.
Here's another
Yes.
strategy: move to Greece.
I
Sorry, Scott.
was in Portugal and they have pretty good healthcare there
I've
too.
heard
Oh,
this.
yeah. There's a lot of these subsidies. Once you hit a certain dollar level, even with Medicare, once you hit certain dollar levels, you end up paying additional Medicare. And so, having the ability, I look at the Roth as this letting the steam out. You can basically just limit your income and take a little bit out of the Roth in order to avoid getting over that cliff. And that allows you to keep these subsidies. But Dan, I think the subsidy that you're talking about is the cap on premiums, which I think is 8.5% for certain levels. That cap is scheduled to go away at the end of 2025, but the regular Affordable Care Act subsidies will not. But that cap will if it doesn't get redone.
Yeah, I think that caught my attention because I will be I'm getting closer to that age. I just turned 59, and you think about these things in this country, which insanely ties healthcare to employment. But that is not the topic, but of course we can get into that. All right, I want to talk about your parents because they were teachers. What did each of them teach and where did they teach?
Yeah, so my father, they were both teachers in New York City Board of Education. And then my mother, she stopped working when she had children, and she stayed home with my brother and I. And my father also worked for the New York City Board of Education, but then he switched from teaching social studies to New York City had a radio station. So he had a radio station, a radio program called Anything Goes. And he would have been like a podcaster now.
Totally.
He would have interviewed you, Dan. His Anything
Aw.
Goes. He interviewed the janitor to congressman to anything. And he was like one of the first one. I remember going into the house and hearing the AOL, the modem going. He would always be mailing me articles. So I think he would have been just like, I think my son and I are saying, Grandpa would have just been spamming us with all of the articles that he'd be sending us. But yeah, he would definitely have a podcast. So they were both teachers. And I remember being, brought up and going to the union rallies and, they're big, union supporters and, the whole career he was a teacher and he had a pension from the New York City Board of Education. So yeah, things had worked out for him.
Did they ever talk about retirement to you when you were growing up? You and I think you said brother.
Um, Not really. I mean, they were big, they were big savers. So they were always big savers. They always lived very frugally. And like I remember my mother would, bring home a couch one day from outside and she sewed it up and made slip covers and that was our couch. And so they always lived very frugally. And I think their philosophy about money was you have money so that you don't have to worry about money. Like, if the refrigerator breaks, if the car breaks, it's not a problem. So it wasn't so they have luxuries, it was so you didn't have money worries. Because my mother lived in the Depression.
That's what I was going to
My
say.
father did too, but it affected her way worse than my father.
I bet you're a big fan of Morgan Housel. We are a huge fan, and he talks about this, how we are such a product of our life experience. And I feel like reading his work, listening to his podcast gives me so much of a better understanding for my grandparents and my family who grew up in Pittsburgh and were sometimes very poor. And you just look at things very differently. I think my life is almost night and day different than theirs. Not that I'm wealthy or I spend a lot of money. It just seems it's much more materialistic than theirs ever was.
Well, yeah, I mean, we never had money problems. Money was not a problem, but they didn't make a lot of money, but they just lived frugally. And I remember my father would drive me to school sometimes, and he had a red VW Bug, and you could look and you could see the street in the hole in the bottom of the car.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, that's no problem. Just don't drop anything.
My uncle in Pittsburgh had I think it was a red VW Beetle, and I'll never
Yeah,
forget my cousin who was my age said, you want to play catch, baseball?" And he said, "My mitt's in the car." And he opens the front hood, and that's where he put it was like a trunk in the front, almost like an electric car today. That's like my first memory. And then of course Herbie the Love Bug. I don't know if you remember that.
yeah.
Sort of made that vehicle iconic. All right, just a couple last questions before I turn over to Scott. Did you grow up in the city of New York?
I grew up in Queens,
Okay, what was
so
that like in the
that's
70s, I'm guessing? 70s was your sort of formative years?
yeah, I was in high school around then. Yeah. Yeah, so we went to Manhattan, which people think New York City, and I think, yeah, so we took the subways, so I think it's a different upbringing, or I'm in the suburbs now. I had to drive my kids everywhere. I think we were more independent. We would take the subway and go into Manhattan, or we could take the bus and go anywhere, or we'd go on our bike anywhere. So I think kids at that time, had more independence. And I
So
still stay in touch with, there's a bunch of us women from high school. We still get together like
oh,
once
I
a
love that.
have dinner. So yeah,
Uh,
nice upbringing.
yeah, I think about myself as a kid. I can think of one time my parents drove me to school. I think it was like after a dentist appointment, where I think now we drive our kids every day. It's insanity. You think of the environmental effect, and also just I just don't think it's great. I think kids need to, fend for themselves a little bit more, but we're just as protective as other parents, I'm sure. All right, I'm gonna turn it over to you, Scott.
Thanks, Dan. Lucretia, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I love the work that you've done, and reading your articles is so much fun, and sometimes not fun at all. But but they tell a story, and that story is super important, and that's what I find fun about them. Is like, oh man, this is something that needs to be told and shown to other people. So I'm really appreciative of the work that you do. I feel like there's so many organizations out there that push financial literacy for women, but it's as a way to market products to them. It's not. It's serious only in that they see it as a way to get in and sell them something, and oftentimes it's something they should not be buying. Um, and so I feel it's a little abusive. But you have no products to sell. Tell us about financialfreedomforwomen.org and
Yeah,
what inspired you to start it.
so uh to take a step back, so I always manage my money. I managed my mother's money after my father passed away. Managed my kids' college funds. So I was always very interested in that. And then, so I was, as we talked about it, I was with IBM. I had a 401k, which I was on top of, and all of that. And then my girlfriend was teaching at a school in Connecticut. I won't mention names. And I was like, okay, let me look at your 403b. I thought, well, the 403b is the same as a 401k. I'm like, what the heck is this? Like, I go onto my website on a 401k, it was with Fidelity. I could see everything. I know everything that's going on. I know what my choices are. I know what my fees are. I know everything within minutes. And then I go to her website and it's a list of 5 companies. That's it. And the phone number for Omni. So, I'm calling up Omni. I'm like, what are the choices? Oh, well, here are the names. This. I'm like, okay, so I start calling up these companies. I'm like, what are the choices? Where's the website that I could look at this? Nothing. they're all annuities. I was
Yeah.
like, and I thought it was just her school system, that this had to be like the worst I've ever seen. It must just be her school system. And so I'm like, well, don't invest in any of these. These are all annuities. So I had her invest in a Vanguard outside of her 403B, first in a Roth and then in a brokerage account in a low cost index funds. And then she switched to another school district. And I was like, okay, yeah, here's your website. All right, you got 5 companies and that's all you get, but at least I know what I was doing. And I'm like, okay, there's 2 here that are good. There's actually the same Vanguard. So now you can contribute to your 403B through the school system, get that tax break, because there is Vanguard. But the teachers, and I had no clue. I was like, this is the strangest thing I've ever seen. So after listening to your podcast, and I realized, well, this is pervasive for K through 12. So, and then when I retired, I decided, I was playing pickleball, I was traveling, I was biking, and then I said, I need something more. I need something more. And, I said, what is my passion? So then I started doing one-on-one workshops for teachers and other people. And where my goal is to educate them to make decisions that are in their best interest. I'm not a registered investment advisor. I'm not selling any products. And as you said, I don't take any donations. I don't take any advertising. I don't take any fees. I don't sell any products. I will not take any money. And then I also started writing articles I would do these workshops to educate women to say, okay, let's look at your 403B or 401k. What are your choices? Let me educate you on what are your levers for increase your retirement saving. Save more, invest better, or work longer. And, show them what their choices are and help them, make a decision that is in their best interest. Since I'm not making any commission or anything, I can show them what the fees are. And then when I would do these workshops, I would learn something, and then I would write an article about how people could do things better and using them as specifically case studies. And then I would also do a lot of research, did a lot of research on annuities, and there really is no information on it. No one wants to tell you anything on that. So
Yeah.
That's how I got into that. And then my college roommate, I'll give her a shout out, Emily Roth. She's a web designer. So she helped me take my articles and then create the website and create a series. I have a series on investing for retirement, which is the S&P 500 low cost index fund. I have one for Medicare and choosing the best Medicare plan. I have one for avoiding financial mistakes, and then I have one for teachers, just for teachers.
Well, your story is so familiar. It's literally the same story how I got into doing this as well. My wife began teaching 20 some years ago, and people who listen, you probably heard the story. And I've asked about the 403B. Somebody actually came into her classroom and tried to sell her one, and I was like, turns out he was just this guy selling annuities. So I asked the school district, hey, what can we invest in? And I got this list. It's just names and some phone numbers. Not a list of products, not a list of investment options, not a list of fees, nothing. The most non-transparent thing I'd ever seen. And I finally said, well, this is insane. We're not going to put any money into this. And that kind of set me on the journey, the same sort of journey. That's how I ended up meeting Dan. So it's a little disappointing that, 20 years later, you went through the exact same thing. But, at least there's resources out there. I want to focus on kind of the type of writing that you do and give an example, because like this particular piece that I had read, it also appeared on Jonathan Clement's Humble Dollar blog. And I think it's titled My Mom's Experience with Medicare. And it focused on the difference between original Medicare and Medicare Advantage. And I think most people who, especially educators, they kind of expect their retirement, their health insurance to be kind of taken care of in retirement. And in some cases it is, but in most cases it's not. Or if it is, it's actually on a Medicare Advantage plan. And you wrote some very, very, very good and very interesting things about the differences between original Medicare and your experiences with Medicare Advantage. Can you talk about that piece a little bit?
Yeah, so I had to, so my father passed away about 12 years before she did. And then, so I had to take over her care, and I moved her up to live with me, closer to me, actually in Connecticut. And I had no clue about Medicare. And I was calling up Medicare, who they'd read me, I'd ask a question, they'd read me the same script. I would ask another question, they'd read me the same script. It was just like I was getting no information. So I had to sign her up for a new plan. So I signed her up. Oh, okay. Blue Cross. Oh, I'm familiar with that. I'll sign you up for Blue Cross. Okay, so now you have Medicare with Blue Cross, I thought. So then she goes into assisted living, and the doctor who came in, the podiatrist who came in, the physical therapist who came to her facility, I would say, oh, she has Medicare. And they're like, no, she doesn't. She has Medicare Advantage. I'm like, no, here, she has Medicare. They're like, no, she has Medicare Advantage. And I'm like, and I didn't understand what was going on, but I knew that no one would take it. And I would have to drive her to the limited doctors who would take her, but I couldn't figure out what was going on. From the research that I've learned, what is really going on is when you pay Medicare your whole life, you pay into it. Then when you're 65, you have two choices. Your first choice is you take original Medicare from the federal government, and then, there's like a 20% gap. So then you have to have gap insurance, which is called Medicare Supplement. So in this case, all your decisions are made by the federal government. If your doctor recommends a procedure, the Medicare says, sure, we'll pay it. And then your supplement plan has no authority to approve or deny. They just have to pay the additional 20%. And there's different levels. That's one choice. That's you have original Medicare. The other choice is you tell the federal government, I don't want original Medicare. I want all of my decisions being made by a for-profit private insurance company. The federal government then pays these for-profit Medicare Advantage companies, Cigna, Aetna, United Healthcare, pays them $1,000 a month, and you no longer have original Medicare. You now have a Medicare Advantage, where all your decisions are made by this for-profit insurance company. So they make their money by paying you by taking the money from the government. Then there are also co-pays that you have to pay, and they pay the doctors less, so that you could only go to certain doctors who are willing to take Medicare, their Medicare Advantage, and have a contract. You can't, in most cases, you can't go out of network. So you want to go to the best hospitals, Memorial Sloan Kettering, Moffitt, they won't take Medicare Advantage. So you're locked, and the top specialists, they won't take Medicare Advantage, where every specialist, every hospital will take Medicare. They love Medicare. So what the Medicare Advantage, the way that they make a profit is by having these procedure called prior authorization, which, oh, okay, you want an MRI? Well, your doctor has to submit for prior authorization, and then they deny it. And then your doctor, if they will do this for you, has to resubmit and talk to a doctor and get prior authorization for you to get the MRI. Every time they make it more difficult and they limit it, the prior authorization. So like United Healthcare does about 10% they deny it.
Yeah.
So, that's your second choice is but the real crime, in my opinion, is other than states, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Maine. So like in my mother's case, she was like 89. So she had COPD, smoked for 50 years, lived to 96, pretty good odds there. But
Wow.
so then Medicare Advantage would no longer authorize her inhalant. So I had to switch, so if you want to breathe, okay. So I had to switch. And only because she was in one of those 4 states was I allowed to switch. Any other state, you can't switch to
Yeah.
a Medicare supplement because they won't take you. So she would have just been screwed at that point. So that's why, when people are 65, they really have to consider what they're giving up when they go with Medicare Advantage. That was sort of a long response, but people
Yeah.
know this.
They do not know this. I like to call it Medicare disadvantage, or I always say that the advantage goes to the insurance company. And it's the other thing is agents who sell Medicare Advantage get paid more than when they're selling a supplemental plan. So you oftentimes will get steered toward an Advantage plan because it pays the agent more. And it just, this feels like something that we could fix, but the insurance companies make so much money and then they turn around and use that money to lobby politicians to keep it in place. And it drives me nuts, as it has driven you nuts.
I
I,
mean, there is nobody who is incented to sell a Medicare supplement and tell people what's going on. All of the advertising, is geared to Medicare Advantage. And so people sign up when they're healthy and they think, I get vision, I have 0 premiums, this is great. I love Medicare Advantage, but it's when they get sicker and, they want to go to this specialist and they can't.
so I've been texting Scott and my mom while you've been having this conversation because my parents have Medicare Advantage. And until recently, my dad has just sung the praises of this. Well, he's had a series of pretty horrific health issues, and they are not singing the praises anymore. So, what you describe, my family has experienced, and it is infuriating, the intrusion of this private system on our healthcare. I just feel like our country does healthcare about as bad as we do weights and measurements, right?
But the thing is, Medicare with a G supplement
It's great.
is fantastic. I
Hmm.
mean, it's better than any employer healthcare plan.
You can literally go anywhere in the United States that accepts Medicare and get it without having to go call an insurance company and ask them for permission.
And all you pay is the deductible, which is about 226. That's it.
Yeah.
That is it. You pay your premiums,
Yeah.
but you don't pay any other bills. You don't see any bills. So people don't realize, yeah, we have a pretty fantastic healthcare system if you pick the right choice.
Yeah, and there's just such a big disincentive to pick the right choice because you're being told by commercials, by agents, by premiums. I mean, who doesn't want to pay 0 premium or a very low premium compared to a supplement? But and this is so like with all of my clients, this is something that I hammer home to them. And I've gone to the extent of literally hiring a independent firm that deals with Medicare and long-term care, and who doesn't sell it but knows it its ins and outs to advise my clients when they're getting to 65 and every single year. And they hate Medicare Advantage. They hate everything about it. And that's all they do is insurance. So like, that's why I told you I had forwarded your article to several people, because people don't know this information. And here's the other issue, and you wrote about this in a separate article. Oftentimes educators, and this is where it gets really hard, educators get health insurance in retirement. Not all of them. Sometimes you have to work a certain number of years. Sometimes it's just a subsidy, and that's way better. But oftentimes they'll only get it if they choose one of the plans that are offered by the employer, and a large percentage of the time that plan is only Medicare Advantage. And you wrote an article about how do you make that decision? Should you skip it and essentially give up that subsidy? And tell us a little bit about that article.
Yeah, so I did a deep dive. Corporations have now switched, and when they offer healthcare in their retirement, they've switched to just offering Medicare Advantage because they save gobs of money. So yeah, I laid out, side-by-side comparison of the G plan, the original Medicare G plan, and then these subsidized healthcare plans. And I sort of showed that which of these require prior authorization, which of these services, MRI, seeing a specialist, all of these. And you could see in one chart, yeah, you're going to pay more monthly, but you're going to have prior authorizations in a lot of them. You also could have higher out-of-pocket costs. So, it's a personal decision. Like if I don't have much money, then I wouldn't have a choice, but if I could, and the differences depends on your state, but the difference could be maybe $200 a month. And if you're in a state other than the 4 I mentioned, you may not be able to switch at a later date. So, it's a personal decision, but you got to look at the numbers and look at it as a long term. You got to decide, when I'm 65, I'm making a decision for the rest of my life. I'm going to have this plan for the rest of my life. So, it's whether people have the money, but you could wind up not getting the health care that you need for the place that you need, when you get sick, by taking these plans that the teacher's retirement offers. It looks like a good deal, and everyone's like, oh, this is a good deal. I could go anywhere. Well, you really can't, and I won't pay much. Well, you might. So, so I'll give myself another plug, the financialfreedomforwomen.org. I have a series on Medicare. There's a specific article on side-by-side comparison of, well, in this case, it was the Connecticut teachers versus original Medicare. And then I have IBM in there too for corporate people.
You have another section on your website called Avoid Teacher Retirement Disasters.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit? I mean, you've kind of already told us a little bit about that, but maybe can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah. So that I got a great picture of like a predatory shark, which I thought that's a great way to do that. And so I talk about as I said, I get it from case studies. So it was, a woman who spoke to a financial advisor, and he's like, don't you want, well, you could invest in the stock market, but you can't lose any money. So how does that work out? And, so she signed up for that. And she said, at this point, then he said, well, you should start, why don't you annuitize it? And once you annuitize it, that's it. You're cooked. You can't get out of it. So, but she said, I have $146,000. She said, he's done great for me. Well, maybe not. So I also have a resource on my website with financial calculators. So, there's one of them that you could say, well, if you put that money in a low-cost index fund, how much would you have? And it was literally twice as much. So, you know, I just want to say, if teachers ever hear, you can't lose money, no risk, guaranteed, any of those words, run. So I was able to, and I'll give Dan, you guys another plug, help her get out of an annuity, which she obviously had no idea that she was in, by following the instructions that Dan Dews provides to get out of an annuity. And just to compare how hard they make it for teachers versus the corporate world. So I'll do these workshops for, someone who has a 401k and say, okay, let's change what you have. Okay, let's change what you have and let's change what the future has. And we do this online, and maybe it takes us 15, 20 minutes once we know what we're doing. And then compare that to this other woman who I got like 3 pages from Dan Dews on how to fill out this form. And like, it took us an hour and a half, and I really know what I'm doing. And I'm like looking from the printout to the form to the printout. I'm like, what the heck is this? And they just make your life just difficult. And, okay, they fill it out. Okay, now you got to fax this in and, call me in 4 to 6 months. So.
Yep, that's about right. It's a total nightmare. They do it on purpose because they don't want you to get your money out.
But I do say, I give Vanguard a plug for another woman. We called up, and I'm going to say who they are, Corbridge, and we just went round and round and round, and they didn't know help, were no help. Then we called up to get out of annuity. We called up Vanguard, and the guy actually filled out the form for us by asking her questions, and it was a transfer form, filled it out, sent it to her with her email within Vanguard. She could download it, sign it. She could have uploaded it, but that was beyond her skills. So just, took it to the post office, sent it to Vanguard, and they took care of everything. And she had it, much quicker.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's
Yeah.
It's it's made to be so complicated. And it's done for a couple reasons. One, people think because it's so complicated that they need a person to help them, like people that call themselves advisors, but they're just salespeople. But the salespeople created that system in the first place to make it so complicated so people would feel like they need help. So they created the disease and act like they're offering the cure. But they forget to tell you that they're the ones who created this disease. And, it's something we've been battling for a long time, and we welcome your voice to the fight. It's so needed. So thank you for that portion of the website. And I think I'll just ask you one other question on an article that you wrote, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. But I know, because healthcare has been a big focus. We've talked about it both pre-retiree, we've now talked post-retiree healthcare. You also published an article that we recently featured in our Weekend Wisdom called Long-Term Care Insurance, Dirty Little Secrets. Can you tell us a little bit about that article?
Yeah, so long-term, so I'll give you my mother as an example. She'd be so proud of all the writing I do about her. Last year that she was in assisted living, it was $120,000 a year, which is crazy. So a lot of people are taking care of elderly parents, and they see these numbers, and it's crazy. So they think, why don't I get long-term health insurance, which the insurance company sells? And that sounds like a great solution. I'll just keep putting in money now when I'm in my 50s, 60s, and then I'll have no problem when I, have to go into assisted living. Well, that's not what's going on at all. Previously, the insurance companies, they did not understand how long people were going to live. So many companies got out of the business. A lot of companies that are still in there are not financially stable, but they changed it totally. And now, you know, things that people don't realize is, you know, you could start paying when you're 50 or 60, and the premiums can just skyrocket, so that, like, you know, when you're in your 80s, you're like, I can't afford to keep paying this amount of money. I've paid in so much, but I can't afford to pay this anymore. So they stop paying, and everything that they put in evaporates. It's totally gone.
Yeah.
So, you know, rising premiums, no one tells them about that. And that's a real problem. And then the second problem is, you know, these are for-profit insurance companies, so that they, you know, when people go into assisted living or nursing homes or whatever, they expect that the insurance companies will pay. Nope. They will do whatever they can to deny coverage. Oh, she's in a wheelchair. Okay, she's legally blind. But looks like she could still feed herself, you know? So we're denying you coverage. So there was a great article that I have in there with a link to New York Times articles that has all of these comments that people are posting that they can't get the insurance companies to pay when they need it. And, you know, forget about you if you are the resident. Like, there's no way that you would have the wherewithal to argue with the insurance companies.
Oh, yeah.
It's kids, you know, who are trying to do this for their parents. And it's very hard to get them to pay when you need it. So I used an example to say a better idea is to save when you're in your 50s or 60s in a low cost index fund like the S&P 500, in a Roth, in a brokerage account, and earmark that for long-term care, you know, so you can use it however you need it when, you know, when you reach that age.
Yeah, I think it's sage advice, and I see it every day. I mean, I literally am getting emails from my clients every day on, you know, hey, I just got an insurance premium increase, which we do, and you know, most of the time we've got to find a way to pay it, but you know, in some cases it's insane what they're allowed to increase, and they're gonna continue to increase. This isn't the last time they're gonna increase it.
Right.
And I've had some good experiences in using it, and then some difficult experiences in using it. So it kind of depends. Long-term care insurance is nearly what took down General Electric. General Electric used to be the most valuable company in the country, and it went out and sold a bunch of long-term care policies at prices that were not the right prices, and it nearly destroyed the entire company. Although honestly, I think Jack Welch had a lot to do with that. He's not the sage that everybody says he is. But long-term care is a tough one. This country needs to do a way better job with retiree. I mean, first of all, I don't understand why my mouth and my eyes are not part of my body. I don't understand why my ears are not part of my body. I don't understand why long-term care is not part of my health insurance. These are all related to our health, and yet they're all excluded. So I think we could do a better job to address healthcare and the stress. Going back to your original Medicare article, you literally had to go and physically take your mom from the assisted living facility to appointments outside of the living facility where doctors were every day coming in there and helping other patients. So you had to take time out of your day. You had to, you know, physically moving someone and putting them in a car and taking them to a doctor. That's exhausting for you and for the patient.
Oh, yeah.
And like, these are the things these are unneeded stressors on the American public who are already under tremendous amounts of unneeded stress. I just think we can do so much better. So I'm gonna stop complaining. But like that's what I love about your writing is like, you get it and you're trying to educate others. And so can anyone read your articles and subscribe to get future articles?
Yeah, anyone can go on to financialfreedomforwomen.org and they could subscribe. Anyone can contact me. I also have a contact button. Happy to answer questions. I'm happy to, you know, help people, I'm fine with that. So it's financialfreedomforwomen.org, has a subscribe button, also has uh, a contact me button, and I don't take any advertising. I don't sell the lists. And people can unsubscribe, whenever they want. So it's just, this is my superpower. And I really enjoy helping people. And I know I've gotten lovely letters. I mean, that's really, people are like, oh, can I take you to dinner? No, please don't take me to dinner. But I do love the letters that I get. So that's really what I find rewarding. So
Oh my gosh, what a pleasure to speak in depth with you, Lucretia. I have a few more questions actually. Um, First, a comment. When I was in grad school, I heard this term social Darwinism, survival of the fittest. And the longer I continue in 403B advocacy, the more I hear about our healthcare system, the more I feel like our country is set up around this principle. And it's the lucky few who have the money, or they do the work to find out, or are able to find people like you. So thank you for what you're doing. I can only imagine the thousands and thousands of women that you've helped, and also men would benefit from your work too. So thank you, first of all, for all that you do.
thank you. I really appreciate that, Dan, Scott.
The second thing I want to ask is, how are, given all of this complexity in financial challenges, and you don't have to get into dollar numbers, but how are you preparing for aging? Is it where you live? Is it how you live? Because, I'm about to be 60 next year. This is very much on my mind. How do I set myself up for the next 25 years, hopefully 25 years, to be active, to be healthy, but also to be able to pay for health care?
Yeah, well, so as I said, I have a financial plan that I put together. It was with Goldman Sachs. And so I know every year how much I can be spending, and based on my assumptions, how much money I have saved and invested. So every year I'm looking at how am I doing against my plan, um, based on my investments and things like that. So, financially, I, make sure that I'm on target. Can I afford this? The market's doing really well. Do I have to change some things? But, so financially, I'm doing that. My plan, long term, when I need long term healthcare, is I would prefer to live at home and have an aide come in to my house. I mean, my mother had a nice time with assisted living, but it was way too stressful for me. I mean, they just keep trying to, increase the rates and increase and increase. It's a money making, machine. So I don't want to give up, my independence for that. So, and then, my lifestyle, I have a very active lifestyle. I play pickleball, I do biking, probably should do some weightlifting, but I don't. But I say that I will, but I actually don't. But because I really don't enjoy it. But I try to keep in shape, and because I think that is your whole quality of life, to last longer. And I know that I think in my genes, I probably will last a long time, but how much of that am I going to be healthy? Am I going to be able to travel? Am I going to be able to do things, is shorter than people think. So I'm traveling a lot now, and, and doing things now because I don't know how long, I'll be able to do that.
Are you familiar with Peter Attia?
No.
So he's kind of he's definitely come onto my radar, and I feel like he might be sort of the moment type of philosophy around aging. He wrote a book called Outlive, and I claim no expertise in it. I've only begun the book, but I've listened to several podcasts with him, and frankly, his approach really resonates with me. And again, I claim no expertise. And as I continue to read the book, I might find things that I disagree with. But right now, what I'm really taking away from it is in your 80s and early 90s, he believes you can live healthily if you do certain things and basically set a goal for what you want to be doing at those ages. And you're training for it now. And a lot of it is, and I'm trying this, I've basically almost given up alcohol. I am
Mhm.
going to sleep at 9 o'clock. And Scott's like eyes are popping out of his head because if you listen to episodes 1 to, I don't know, 50, we're drinking beer on the podcast at 10 in the morning. Um, and I have to say, I've been really following the sleep methodology, and it has been unbelievable. And my joke is, it's basic. Someone said, "Well, what's the formula?" It's basically the way you put your kids to sleep when you were a parent, when they were little. They eat early, they get a bath, and then you read them a story and they go to bed. That's basically what it is. But anyway, this is what I'm sort of like needing to focus on is really training for that stage of my life. And I will say, particularly for women, and my wife has pointed this out, strength training is a huge thing. Women have more susceptible to bone density loss. And it's really important to do some strength training, is what I'm getting from this. And again, it's one philosophy, it may be discredited, but I find a lot of value in this. And I want to thank you too for pointing out the shortcomings of assisted living. One of my first assignments when I was a journalist out of college, we did this really cool issue called 1 to 100, where we interviewed 100 people aged 1 to 100 in the city I was living in at the time, Corona, Norco. And I was the only staff reporter slash photographer. So I would go to these assisted living facilities to find the 90-year-olds so that I could interview them. It it kind of frightened me actually, Lucretia and Scott. It was not how I think I wanted to be at that age. So anyway, this is a long way of getting back to what you've said. I really like this idea of being able to age and die in my home and maybe have someone come in and assist me. So anyway, thank you for mentioning that. So I thought I'd share a tidbit of something I've been sort of learning about. Your website, I love clarity and organization. Maybe it's the German in me. I love how you have these 4 core areas: make the right retirement investment decisions, choose the best Medicare plan. As Scott mentioned, avoid teacher retirement disasters, avoid these financial mistakes. And again, that's financialfreedomforwomen.org. So I just want to say tip of the cap to you for that.
Thanks. I really do appreciate it. And I'm a big fan, as I said, of the two of you. I listen to your podcasts and, send out your links, and I have your links also on my resources website.
Well, again, is there anything last words you'd like to share? Anything else that maybe we didn't cover you would like us to have asked you about?
I just, I just feel it's so unfair that teachers are, uh, you know, treated like this. And I can't believe that you've been doing this for 20 years, and it would be so easy to fix if it were just under ERISA, and that the politics in the school systems doesn't allow this to change. It's just horrifying. I mean, me as an outsider, I can't change it within any school system. I've offered my service. Oh, I'd love to teach a class. I want to help people. Why do we set? And it's just like, I'm always like stepping on things and, oh, you can't do that. Or no, don't say that. Or just like, don't talk to that person. I think it's so black and white, and it's just, uh, I don't know how you change it, because I know you've been trying, but it's just really not fair for teachers.
It is beyond frustrating. We are very much in the grassroots business, and this seems to be the best approach. But to your point, there is it's like that internet meme, one weird trick to fix the K12 403B. Make it subject to ERISA. But as we've talked about throughout this podcast, the financial interests that are aligned against that. I don't know if you listened to our podcast with the senator from Illinois. We sat in Zoom calls, and the amount of, I'm not going to swear, but I almost did, mansplaining that we listened to her have to listen to from these dudes making so much money off of the predominantly female profession. And I'm going to say it, and Scott and I talk about this. Would this be a problem if 70% of the employees were men? I don't think so.
Dan, are you saying there's misogyny in the 403B?
God. I'm telling you, like, another big podcast I'm liking is Julia Louise Dreyfus,
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I love
Wiser
her.
Than Me. Have you heard this? Wiser
Yeah.
Than
Oh,
Me. She
so
interviews, go ahead.
that podcast, she speaks to her mother at the end. That always makes me cry.
I
I
get
mean,
Yeah.
goosebumps. I
to
just
me,
listened.
that is just, of all the things she has and all the wealth and the fame and everything, that she has her mother who is so coherent at 90 whatever. That is what I am so envious of.
It's just the whole concept that she interviews women older than her because she feels like they have not been afforded a voice. And as we age, we know we have wisdom, and these women have enormous amounts of wisdom, and they're often sidelined as they get older. So for her to have this forum, it's so funny. I have kids, and I'll just sometimes get frustrated. I know I'm older. I've experienced this. Do this, save money, exercise now. They don't want to hear it from me. You're never, what do they say? You're never a prophet in your own hometown.
Yeah.
Lucretia, I know we're going to stay in touch. We love what you do. Thank you for your time. Thank you for this enormous resource you're providing. And I think it's just going to continue to grow in popularity.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye, guys.